Hi everyone, my name is Steph. This is the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today we are starting another reading project. This year is full of reading projects as I'm trying to read down my TBRs in various capacities. And today we are tackling the oldest books on my Kindle, which also happen to be the oldest books that I own that are unread. So for anyone who is unfamiliar and hasn't been around for a while, I organise all of my unread books on my Kindle, particularly on my iPad Kindle app, into different folders, and I just use this to help me keep track of what I've read, what I haven't read, etc. At the end of 2024, I reorganized all of my unread books into the year that I acquired them. And the oldest unread year I have with books in it is 2018, and there are 3 books in this folder. So we have our 3 books. The first one is Brooklynaire by Sarina Bowen, which kills me that I haven't read this yet because so many people have talked about it over the years and whatever, and it feels like one of those OG books that people were talking about. So I'm going to be tackling that one. I also have Any Duchess Will Do by Tessa, and I acquired a lot of Tessa books in different series out of order, so I'm going to be reading Spindle Cove out of order, and I don't care about it because I just want to get this folder read. And then the last book in the folder is The Collapsing Empire by Scalzi, who I really enjoy a lot of his newer work because he's very lighthearted in his science fiction stories. This one I think is a more traditional kind of space opera-y kind of story, which I haven't read for a while, but it is Scalzi and I know his writing and I know that the writing will be really engaging and fun. And this reading vlog is going to be fairly eclectic because we have a sports romance, a historical romance, and a science fiction space opera kind of story. So we're all over the place, but I thought this would be kind of fun to make my way through different types of books as I'm reading down my ebook and my physical TBR throughout the year. So hopefully you enjoy this vlog and that you stick around to find out about the books. I'm not really going to be including any footage in between. I'm just going to read the books and then sort of report back when I finish reading. So stay tuned. Hi everyone. So in typical me style, I finished Brooklynaire and then went and had dinner and totally forgot to update you on the fact that I finished the book. This is the first book in the Brooklyn Hockey series, which I didn't realize it was a series, and I don't know if it was originally planned on being, if it was originally planned to be part of a series, but apparently it is now, and there's 7 books in the series. I'm also apparently just interested enough to consider putting it on my series TBR to track and maybe come back to at some point. We are following Rebecca and Nate. Nate is a tech billionaire who bought a hockey club and moved the team to Brooklyn, and Rebecca is his original office manager from when he first got started with his mates and his business. So they've known each other for 7 years, and at the start of the book we find out that Rebecca has injured herself on the ice because when Nate bought this hockey team, he moved her over to as the office manager basically for the team. It's a position that she loves, but she kind of also feels like she might have been demoted even though she kind of got a pay rise for it. She doesn't quite know why he moved her out of the main office. She has an accident on the ice at the very start and she has a concussion and she isn't well, and Nate is straight away at her door trying to find out if she's okay, and she's like, no, I'll be back at work in a couple of days, and he's like, no, you're not going to be back at work in a couple of days, you have a concussion, blah blah blah. So he's very much in caretaking mode. And throughout the book, at least in the first half, we get these flashbacks to their original meeting and sort of the build up to their relationship. So they started out as colleagues but became friends, although Rebecca always feels like there's this disparity and doesn't know if there'll ever be a balance between their relationship and the power dynamics because he is incredibly wealthy and she is basically seen as his secretary, even though that's not her job and he doesn't think of it that way. And in the 7 years that they've been together, they've seen each other through some fairly heavy things, including Nate finding his fiancée cheating on him, which does later come back full circle as the Brooklyn team gets into the Stanley Cup. But it's this situation where, you know, Rebecca has been injured and Nate can't stay away. He has to make sure that she's okay. And them finding opportunities to admit their feelings for one another, but also Rebecca being unsure of it because she's in a really precarious position because she is his employee. And even Nate, who is this absolute cinnamon roll nerd of a character, having to realize the position that he has put her in, despite the fact that they're both consenting adults. So it was fun. Like, there's a couple of little things that sort of dragged it down to a 3.5, but a 3.5 star romance for me is perfectly fine. It's a good time. The writing and the pacing was really good. There's a whole bunch of side characters that I'm interested in. So, I mean, all in all, that seems like a fairly decent win. So I will check in when I get to the next book. I'll probably do Tessa next and finish with Scalzi. Alrighty, so I'm back with, well, I've finished reading the second book for this vlog. So I read Any Duchess Will Do by Tessa, which is book 4 in the Spindle Cove series. So I am 100% reading this Spindle Cove series out of order, even though I said I wasn't going to do that last year. I'm now just doing it. This is the story of Griffin, who is a duke, and he has sworn off romantic entanglements for a period of time, to the point where his mother has kidnapped him and is taking him to Spindle Cove and has declared that he's going to walk into the room of this tavern and choose a bride from the women who are there. And she makes this declaration in front of all of them. And Griffin thinks that he is going to outsmart his mother, and he ends up choosing a servant girl called Pauline. And what he doesn't realize is that Pauline is a very smart, very capable young woman. And eventually what they do is they strike a bargain where she is going to be trained by his mother to be a duchess, and he is going to pay her to fail spectacularly in front of everyone. It's kind of this case of Pauline can't fail. Like, she just isn't able to fail because she's very clever, very smart. Her personality is wonderful, and she just kind of lights up any room that she's in, even when things supposedly go wrong. Pauline and Griffin begin to fall for one another. We find out more about Griffin's backstory, and I'll put a spoiler tag here and timestamp it, but I think it's kind of important just for people to know. So a lot of what has stopped Griffin from developing a relationship with anyone is that his previous mistress got pregnant and had a baby girl. And even though his mistress decided she didn't want to keep the baby, he decided that he did. And so he was fully prepared to care for her and raise her and just spoil her rotten, and had even gone as far as preparing a nursery and organising for nursemaids and things like that. And then she died when she was only very, very small. I can't remember whether it was days or weeks, but she didn't live for very long. And so he has just been absolutely devastated, and he's never told anyone this. And so eventually Pauline is able to get that out of him. That's the tension in the story, and Griffin comes to realise that Pauline is the person for him. She is the only one who pushes all of his buttons, who is able to be on the same level as him. Meanwhile, she's fully prepared to walk away from it. She has dreams of opening a lending library in Spindle Cove, housing naughty books for women, and also taking care of her younger sister. So it was a really good story. I like Tessa Dare. I didn't like this as much as I have previously liked some other Tessa Dare books, but it's been a while since I read a Regency historical romance. So, that could also be it. It's not something I naturally gravitate towards much of anymore anyway. So it was fine. Also, interestingly enough, this book, and actually every book in this video, fits in for the most recent 25 in 25 prompt from Izzy's challenge, which is 25 random prompts dropped throughout 2025. It's a prompt challenge I'm participating in. I can't tell you what the prompt was, but this book, the previous book, and even the next book all count. So I've ticked off my second 25 in 25 challenge as well. And the next time I check in, I will have read The Collapsing Empire by John Scalzi. So I am back with the review for the final book for this vlog. I was reading The Collapsing Empire by John Scalzi, which is the start of the... oh gosh, I've already forgotten the series title. I just wrote it down like 2 hours ago. So the series is the Interdependency series. I think there might be 3 books in the series, and it is a space opera set in space across multiple planets. And we are following multiple characters as well. It has John Scalzi's trademark humour in it, and I ended up listening to the audiobook because I also had the audiobook. I was doing some cleaning this morning and I just wanted to read a book, so I figured, let's kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Will Wheaton did a great job narrating the audiobook. So we have 4 main characters, kind of. I would probably be a little bit clearer if I had read it, but we have one character who is the son of a man who is doing some research for the galaxy's emperor, who is like the emperor. The son and the father are scientists. They study the flow which helps people to travel between different planets. And it still takes a long time, but these are like laneways in space where people can safely travel. And they have discovered that the flow is failing and that all of the flow lanes are going to start shutting down. A lot of these planets are very widespread and they rely on having access to the flow in order to survive. So this is a problem. And there's also some political maneuvering going on. So the father decides to send his son to the emperor with this information, with all of the up-to-date reports and everything on everything that he has gathered, in the hopes that it can be used to sort of save this galaxy-wide empire. Meanwhile, the current emperor has died, leaving it to his daughter, who is not the intended successor, but his heir ended up dying in some kind of vehicle accident. So the new emperor is kind of very reluctant, and she is having to learn a lot very quickly in order to maintain her position, and she's having to learn how to politically maneuver within her new world because there are people who are trying to marry her, there are people who are trying to create instability, she has assassination attempts, and then you also have the captain of a ship who is the one transporting the son to the emperor, and she is one of these characters that just does not care about things. Like, she has no F's to give on anything, and it's really fun to read. Like, I like those characters because how am I going to best make a profit out of this? I kind of like those characters. So she's a character, and then there's also a minor noble who is based on one of the planets who completely misreads the situation, tries to kill the son, tries to blow up the ship, etc., but then realizes he's acting on faulty information and suddenly finds himself in a position of power, but he's in a position of power at a time of crisis. The first book really sets up the conditions for all of this, how all of these characters meet, and then we're kind of left with the cliffhanger of, you know, what's going to happen next, what's going to happen with the flow, because the planet that the sun was from is called the End. It's like the furthest planet that has been colonized, and it's one of the first planets to be affected by what's going on with the flow, so no one can now leave the planet. That laneway has closed, but people can still travel there. So there's this really cool world building, or galaxy building, I suppose, and it was just really, really fun. So at some point I would like to come back and continue the series and find out what happens. I mean, I've got a lot of things to read between now and then, so it's not going to be right this second, but I did really enjoy it, and I think it's just very trademark John Scalzi, which means it's always going to be fun. And on that note, with those 3 books read, I have read the 3 oldest titles that I own, and that brings me an immense amount of joy. So I'm super excited to have done that, tick that off. Those are 3 more ebooks off my Read What You Own TBR, but it's also the 3 oldest books that I own. It was a really good little project, I think, to work on. I'm curious to know if you guys kind of like this format, this kind of vlog where I am reading some of the oldest books that I own. I do have books in my 2019 and my 2020 folders. I think there is 9 in 2018 and 8 in 2020, which is too many books for a vlog. I wouldn't do 8 or 9 book long vlog for a project like this, but I could do another 3 book one or whatever. If you guys like this format and you kind of want to see me reading some of these older titles that I purchased and acquired earlier in my booktube journey, feel free to let me know if you'd like to see more of them, or if you have suggestions for other kinds of ways of picking books, let me know that down below as well. And just because the last book I finished on was a science fiction book and I'm hoping to get my sci-fi vibes on this year, feel free to leave a spaceship or a rocket ship emoji to let me know that you're here if you don't want to leave a comment. I hope that wherever you're in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.